My name is Keshika Gavanda, and my research paper is on the change of auditors and whether it enhances independence. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present my research paper. It's also my first time presenting. I'm the only author to the paper, and I wrote it with the help of a supervisor. So
can you make it a large screen a bit, or size screen?
Sure. So the purpose of the research was to investigate why companies change auditors and whether it actually enhances independence. The relevance of the research basically stems from previous research and financial sagas that have happened in financial history, like the Enron debacle. And independence is the cornerstone of auditing, the auditing profession. So independence necessitates that auditors conduct audits free of bias and subjectivity. So the company that I researched is a JSE listed company. It is in the oil and gas industry, which had a long-standing relationship with its auditors for 60 years. I investigate both sides of the research, that is the side of the company and the impact it had on the company and the impact that it had on the auditors and how they actually came in and did the audit. So the process began with a step-by-step process, and it began with a formal decision where the audit committee decided that they wanted to change auditors because of this long-standing relationship. So that's where the formal decision was actually made. They then went on to bidding, which started in March 2013. The transition when the auditors were actually appointed began in April 2013, and the audit was finally concluded in June 2014. So when the audit committee had made this decision, they then gave the CFO a directive to change auditors. The CFO then appointed something called a transition team made up of a CFO and one senior manager. Now, it sounds like a very small team, and they were tasked with a major project. They then coordinated the whole process from start to finish, from the bidding right till the end. Companies were asked to bid for the audit. There were 3 companies that bid, and they needed to have key skills. And those key skills were they needed to have an integrated approach toward the audit, and to have the necessary skills, and to have a global reach, because the company was complex and was located in different regions. So they then made their bids, and one audit firm was actually appointed. So the audit firm that was appointed won the audit simply because they had the necessary skills, they had a large audit team, and they had a global reach. A global reach meaning they had offices in the locations of the companies where the subsidiaries and joint ventures were. Also the lead partner on the audit had 25 years of experience in the natural resource and energy field. So he had industry-specific knowledge, which gave him an advantage. So when the transition began, there was a risk manager that was appointed. He, being a chartered accountant, had the knowledge and expertise. He, through workshops and through integration with the underlying CFOs in the group, he coordinated workshops where they established the risks, the key risks. They identified 8 risks, and these risks were then investigated and debated, and the 8 risks were discussed to establish how they would be mitigated in the process. The process he ran from the moment of appointment right till the final audit report was signed. The 8 risks were obtaining buy-in from the underlying stakeholders in the group, like the supply chain, the procurement, the finance team. It also, one of the risks were loss of key knowledge from previous auditors, the lack of skilled staff from the new audit team, and the lack of sufficient communication between the company's team and the audit team, and the risk of having two auditors on site. So in the actual audit, when the audit began, the partners and the senior managers were taken on site visits. The lead partners were actually taken all over the globe to visit the actual sites, whilst the senior managers then visited the sites that they were auditing. They performed walkthroughs and obtained information. So the key part and the major decisions were made by the lead partners integrated with management. The challenges that they faced during this integration and this audit was that they found that there was high complexity in the group. The technical knowledge was vast and the contracts were lengthy. So the lead partner then said that this was one of the most complex groups that he had audited in the history of his experience. And the outcomes were that they actually needed to build relationships in order to ensure that they didn't escalate things to a high level. They reached a point where they had such disagreements between the partners and the CFOs in the organization that it went all the way up to the audit committee. And one of the key learnings here was that if they had had relationships, it would not have escalated to that point. And one of the lines that the CFO from the transition team said was that they were not mature enough emotionally to be able to handle the discussion and the disagreements. So the lessons learned were that the age-old top-down approach, where the group CFO communicated this change all the way down to the CFOs and their teams, did work. They won stakeholder agreements, and they were able to transfer and gain that knowledge and carry out the audits within the time frame that they needed to. They were able to deliver results and to give an audit opinion. So the challenges were recognized. Also, the company realized that their age-old processes now needed to be reviewed and being made efficient. They then created efficiencies. They started re-looking at their processes, and they realized that their primitive ways no longer work. So if you look at the research, previous research has indicated that in the initial years of the audit, it does take a long time to gain knowledge of the business, and there is risk of material misstatement because of lack of information. Also, there is a risk that you may miss things in the first years. It's also very time consuming and cost intensive and capital intensive. And it was found that in the first year of the audit, though it actually cost 150% of the audit fee. The amount of time spent was lengthy in order to catch up on technical papers and understanding of the business. So if you look at the cost and the benefits were that the company had a fresh eyes on the financial statements and on their results. They were able to create efficiencies despite the costs of going through this lengthy process and transitioning to new auditors after 60 years. There were, of course, staff frustrations where people were inundated with work much more than they would ordinarily be in a normal audit situation. The auditors also had a lot more time spent on the audit than they had recovered in the audit fee. The company had many projects going on at the same time, but ultimately they found that they had gained much more in this process. And looking back in terms of hindsight, they believe that the benefits were far outweighed the costs of transitioning to new auditors. The study was relevant in the sense that future research can be used. This can be used for future research in South Africa, in a South African context, to establish how costly and labor intensive it is to change auditors. Thank you very much. That's all from me.